Hey YouTube. So another day, another person accuses me of conflating prostitution and trafficking, prostitution and exploitation, prostitution and pimping, because these are not inherently related, we are told. Well, let me introduce you to someone from the pro-prostitution side who disagrees. So this organization is called TAMPEP. TAMPEP stands for the European Network for the Promotion of Rights and Health Among Migrant Sex Workers, and it's an umbrella organization which involves networking between various pro-prostitution lobby groups and so-called sex workers' unions. Before anyone gets upset because I put the last word in scare quotes, I do this because many of the organizations included under this banner are of dubious status or openly advocate not just for sex workers, but for management, formerly known as pimps. I put sex work in quotes whenever I use the word because I consider prostitution neither sex nor work. And one of the reasons I hold this position today is explicitly because I sat down and read and listened to individuals and organizations combining these two words in their titles. This will give you an exemplary insight into how this very process goes. Now, other than functioning as a network and an umbrella organization for these national outreach and lobby groups, TAMPEP also uses the funding it gets from places such as the European Union to conduct studies on people in prostitution, which, even as an abolitionist, I won't deny are useful and important work, which is rarely done on national and governmental level. But TAMPEP also commissions pamphlets meant specifically for prostituted persons, with the intent to educate about health, safe sex, and safety in general. And it's these pamphlets specifically that need a closer looking at, because it's there that we find what organizations like TAMPEP really mean when they say sex work migration, and consequently what anyone supports who puts money into such groups. The pamphlets I'll be focusing on are 3 pamphlets commissioned by TAMPEP in 1994, and while they are not recent publishing, they are still available for download and thus endorsed on the TAMPEP website. The 3 pamphlets are mostly designed as comics, the first 2 being drawn by male cartoonist David Tefalo, and are intended to be easy to read in order to serve as information booklets for women in prostitution. They tell educational stories of exemplary sex workers and their ups and downs in the sex trade. From here on out, I'll be using women instead of people, in acknowledgement that the vast majority of persons in prostitution are female, and because the comics themselves only feature prostituted women. Yeah, could you tell this was done by a male artist? The first of 3 comics is incorporated into a pamphlet on safe sex practices, which advises prostituted women on STDs and condom use. As any standard safe sex guidebook, it tells prostitute women to avoid coming in contact with the punter's blood, urine, and feces, and to use a condom or dental dam whenever possible. The advice section specifically warns of cheaters, aka buyers who refuse a condom, pull them off mid-intercourse, or not disclose an STD infection. It also tells drug-addicted women to not use strangers' needles, and warns prostitute women who are pregnant that various STDs can infect the unborn in their belly. So far, just the regular stuff you'd have to deal with in any normal work environment. We all fear our customers' bodily fluids, unclean needles, and deadly illnesses whenever we go into our offices or get behind our shop counters, right? Right. And I almost forgot, it gives advice on which types of lubricants to use as to make the daily penetration more bearable, and what to do to hide the blood of menstruation if you're among the women who cannot take days off, because that's normal. This is stuff we have all seen before, right? We've seen this over and over again from sex workers' rights organizations. Pain during intercourse, addiction, deadly disease, and the looming threat of physical violence are the everyday bread of the average prostitute woman, as these bits of publishing from, my political opposition freely admit. But the TAMPEP pamphlets take things a step further. When we dive into our story of Sabina, a young sex worker migrant from Nigeria. Sabina's story begins with her arriving at an airport in an unnamed European city, where she is picked up by a Madame Hannah, who immediately escorts her to a hotel room and promptly informs her that she is not legally permitted to take on a regular job, but can make money quickly if she is nice to men, and wears the appropriate clothing. Sabina is shocked by this revelation and clearly states that she has no interest in clearing her debts to Madame Hannah in this manner. When she requests regular employment, Madame Hannah guilt-trips her about her family and insists Sabina pay for the traveling expenses that have arisen from her journey to Europe. Sabina acquiesces, but bursts into tears as Madame Hannah exits the room. This exemplary sex worker story is actually describing a common method of sex trafficking. A young woman unfamiliar with the laws in the country she is invited to is promised a job as a maid, a waitress, or similar. Upon arrival, she is quickly informed that no such job exists, but that she is now indebted to the trafficker, whom she must pay off, often coupled with threats to herself and her family, in order to return home. This fits the story TAMPEP is telling about Sabina to a T. The basic moral imperative here would be to inform any woman finding herself lured to Europe under false pretenses to immediately inform law enforcement and social services, depending on state's law, as she may well be entitled to protective status as a sex trafficking victim. I know these laws are lacking in many places, but sex work, this is not. The TAMPEP pamphlet does no such thing. The next time we meet Sabina, she has just joined the sex trade, entering on the street level, now in the appropriate attire of low-cut mini dress, high heels, and a tight jacket. Here she meets the title character, Augusta, who quickly becomes her mentor, warning Sabina that the first time is difficult and that she needs to be careful, but that she shouldn't worry because you get used to it. Sabina does her first client and returns with a happy smile on her face. The tears from yesterday all but disappeared, telling the other women on the street excitedly about the large sum of money she just got by not using a condom. Augusta sternly corrects her, lecturing her that if you want to continue to work, you must never make love without a condom. Judgmental and intensely sex-negative as I am, I can't help but interject here to point out how perfidious it is to describe a situation as lovemaking, wherein a poor indebted Nigerian woman with no choices is being used by a man in a car or by the side of the road. Continuing with the story, another woman named Yuna tells about how she caught chlamydia and is now unable to have children, right? Because any normal line of work carries the common risk of rendering you infertile. Next, the story makes a time jump to a point where Sabina is 3 months into street prostitution and has succeeded in paying off her debts, but is sick due to juju magic from jealous competitors, as she believes, not an uncommon method for traffickers to use. Wise Augusta schools her once again that no magic is doing this to her and that what Sabina needs is a doctor. At the doctor's, it turns out that Sabina has caught syphilis. Lucky her, because this type of STI is no longer deadly if you have access to modern medicine. With a sad smile on his face, the doctor warns Sabina once again that her line of work can lead to infertility or death, and that she must practice safe sex and responsible needle use for drug injection. The following few scenes in the comic repeat the written advice on correct condom use and artificial lubricant, while Yuna proposes all the wrong methods and Augusta swiftly corrects her. Well aware that sex born from mutual attraction is fundamentally different from sexual contact occurs through money, the women also discuss how they'd prefer to not use condoms with their boyfriends. And then, after an unspecified amount of time, we are already at the final pages of the first comic, where model sex worker Augusta is joyfully packing her bags to return home. What a success her time on the streets of Europe has been. She is free of disease and has earned so much money that she can make all her dreams come true. She has built a house, opened a shop, and plans to marry her boyfriend and have his babies upon returning to her home country. Meanwhile, Yuna tells the cautionary tale of her madam, who is now diseased, poor, and ugly, because she did not practice regular condom use. Finally, Yuna and Sabina thank Augusta for all her wisdom and then wish her farewell. There is no other way of putting it. This pamphlet is plain and simple victim blaming. While not entirely disappearing the sex buyer, at least 3 panels depict punters explicitly, or in others as penises, and when their faces are shown, they do look like average Joes. Nothing in the pamphlet tells of TAMPEP campaigns to educate sex buyers to practice safe sex. It is the given that condom use and STD testing are the duty of the prostitute woman. If a woman is sick, she should have been more careful. Because if we're really honest, we know that sex buyers as a group feel no responsibility towards women in prostitution and can't possibly be relied on to provide and use condoms. In fact, sex buyers can't even be relied on to not get handsy or violent, as the second, shorter comic strip shows us. In Augusta's Way on Security, we learn helpful tips for sex workers to not get raped or murdered on the job. That's right. Here's a list of things that you can do to not end up a corpse while working your normal job that is totally exactly like retail and burger flipping. If you've seen my sex worker safety series, most of this won't be new to you. I'm showing you all this again to make clear that this is the norm. This is the norm of what pro-sex work organizations expect prostitute women to tolerate. Under prohibition and legalization and decriminalization. So advice number 1. Choose working in locations that are well lit. Never go to a client's house. Instead, go to a hotel if he insists. Choose the place yourself. It should be your choice, not his. Notice the choice rhetoric here. We are talking about women in situations of dire poverty and often under the threat of dangerous blackmailers and traffickers, yet they should make the choice to work under bright street lamps every night. Totally appropriate to keep saying choice in this context. Always work in groups and always check for each other. After about 15 minutes, always write down car numbers for each other. In hopes of doing what exactly? In the first and longer comic, we learned that the women don't really have the option of calling the police for fear of being deported. What exactly are they supposed to do if one of them is kidnapped? Call Madame Hannah, who, while being a literal blackmailer, might know some even more dangerous types to help out in this situation? Never agree to go with more than one client at a time, no matter how much you were offered. Translation: take care to not get gang raped while doing sex work. The next 2 panels, I have to say, actually shocked me. I've been researching prostitution for 4 years now, and in that time I've been on dozens of sex buyer forums, read hundreds of entries, and studied every single attempted murder case committed against a prostitute woman in Germany since 1987. Spoiler alert, the most likely killer is a sex buyer. But it turns out that you can still shock me by publishing a safety pamphlet that really talks no nonsense, but clearly shows sex buyers choking women. I have never seen sex buyer violence described and depicted so blatantly by the pro-prostitution side. So here's the great advice. Avoid drunken clients. Always stay calm with aggressive clients, even in the face of deep provocation. If a client is troublesome or insists that you do what you don't want to do, stay calm, pretend, and promise to do as he says while you look for a way to escape. That sounds like a safe and sane work environment. If an aggressive client grabs you by the neck, don't try to remove his hands. Instead, grab him very hard by the balls or kick him there. How many of you people listening to this who have worked somewhere have gone through training to kick your customers in the balls because they might attack you? Maybe if you work in a high security prison, right? Or as like a therapist for the criminally insane or something. Anyone else had to learn this? Anyone else had to lie down underneath men who might start choking you? Let me say this. While it's good for any woman to know basic self-defense, what TAMPEP is doing by on the one hand labeling prostitution sex as well as work, and on the other saying that it involves potentially being suffocated to death, this is gaslighting. This is a don't get raped manual. These safety pamphlets suggest that aggression on the part of the sex buyer must be carefully calculated and expected at every step of the way, and that there's nothing inherently wrong about a job where attacks like these are common. But there absolutely fucking is. A work environment that involves daily fear and risk of beatings, rape, or murder at the hands of a customer is fundamentally incompatible with human rights and should under no circumstances be normalized. Expecting women to take care it doesn't happen to them is downright cruel and again crosses the line into victim-blaming territory. Yet here we are. This is the daily world of sex work, not according to radical feminists like me, but according to those who want you to be in the streets shouting blowjobs are real jobs. The don't get raped tips continue. Do not wear a long Bob Marley hairstyle. Tie it back with a wig that comes off easily if pulled. If you must wear a necklace, use one that breaks or comes off easily. Do not wear a scarf or tie around your neck. Do not wear long tight skirts to work or high-heeled shoes because you cannot run fast. Do not wear expensive clothes or jewelry at work, as you can be attacked by thieves who will want to steal from you. Feminists are up in arms when teenage schoolgirls are told to not show bra straps, or when women are advised not to wear ponytails when moving through the public sphere, yet we wait for the widespread public outrage over dress codes such as these. If you're not furious yet, read this again and imagine we're telling schoolgirls or women leaving their houses this for the sake of their own safety. Near the end, the pamphlet recommends the use of pepper spray, panic buttons, and literal rape whistles. If it's unacceptable for the general female population to have to carry this stuff around, how is it acceptable that women in prostitution must take these measures? Near out of words to describe the situation. It's, fuck that male artist for that nip slip. Fuck you, David, to follow. Whatever the fuck your name is. I don't know if you get paid for this crap or if you thought you were doing a great act of charity, but that was fucking unnecessary. As its very final part, the pamphlet lists objects which clients can have in their cars and which they may use against the sex worker. Knives or guns, large cushions or a pillow, belts and or pieces of rope. Nothing to see here, just some potential murder weapons. Pillows can kill you. Don't have sex with men who have pillows. We've heard that one before, actually. Don't go into bed with a man who has pillows there. Stay safe. Stay safe, ladies. TAMPEP's useful advice for you if you do spot one of these objects that might be used to end your life is: if there is any item which might seem dangerous to you, find a way to gently make your client lock it in the boot before you enter the car. All this should be done in the presence of your colleagues. Yes, be gentle to the guy who might try to kill you. Be gentle. How about running the fuck away? Didn't we see a man use his bare hands to strangle a woman just one page ago? He doesn't need a pillow to smother her. How can you advise women to get into cars with men who bring guns, even if they do get locked away? Am I the crazy one here for calling the sex trade violent and sex buyers inherently dangerous? I mean, I get called a fucking Nazi. But here's the pro-prostitution crew making all my arguments for me, and I'm just standing by the side. Yeah. If there's still any doubt in your mind about prostitution inherently involving the risk of deadly violence, and the pro-lobby normalizing said brutality and exploitation, here's the final pamphlet from TAMPEP for which we change location and companions moving to Italy. Here, our protagonists are a group of Albanian women prostituted on the street. This comic is harder to read than the other two, not only because it's in Albanian, but because it's poorly structured and leaps between stories, but I'll try my best to summarize it. We follow the fates of 4 women in this information pamphlet. Toida, who like Augusta is the mother of the group and knows whom to trust and where to go to get medical support without being deported. Shpresa, a 16-year-old trafficking victim who's found dead right at the start of the story, murdered by her pimps. Her inclusion in the safety pamphlet makes no clear sense, as we learn nothing about her except that her killers are caught and sentenced because Toida gave the police the relevant information. I'm not sure what to conclude from this except maybe a call to women in prostitution to work with the police in murder cases. No advice is given as how to handle these interactions with police, nor where to go if one should encounter a minor in the sex trade. Because with Shpresa being a minor, we are now, without doubt, in sex trafficking territory. Yet this is supposed to be a guide about safety at work for sex workers. This is not at all the first time the pro-prostitution lobby has labeled the sexual abuse of minors as sex work or statutory rape as young people selling sex. But it remains disturbing to encounter it so blatantly and brutally. The third woman in the story is Besa, whose storyline starts tragic, with Toida taking her for treatment after a failed abortion attempt, wherein Besa inserted an electric rod in her vagina in hopes of triggering a miscarriage. Which reminds me of these 2 real-life cases of prostituted Romanian women, 20 and 18 years old respectively, being pimped throughout their pregnancies, giving birth inside brothels, and then throwing their babies out the window in a panic. In the other pamphlets, we had women believing in juju magic. Here we have another strident example both of extreme desperation and lack of knowledge about safe sex practices or abortion. But we're supposed to believe that these women are workers, able to negotiate fair business dealings with clients, despite the growing list of near-death experiences. Or death experiences in the case of Cipresa. This becomes even more absurd when we learn that Besa entered into Italian street prostitution after fleeing Albania and crossing the Mediterranean Sea on a rubber boat, in hopes of marrying an Italian man who, upon arrival, started beating and pimping her out. We've truly ventured very far from what the general population conjures up when they hear sex work. Having now seen 3 instances of what, to my mind, constitutes trafficking, I'm beginning to seriously wonder what it takes for TAMPEP to consider a woman trafficked. Here's the definition they announced they were using in a document where they define their terms. Unfortunately, I don't know what year this document is from. Trafficking in persons shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. The consent of a victim is irrelevant if any of the means are used or if the victim is aged under 18. So, Besa, Cipresa, and Sabina from earlier were all trafficked by the definition that TAMPEP themselves use, and which they claim to oppose. Yet their stories are in a guidebook for sex workers. Furthermore, the term glossary shies away from using the term pimp and trafficker and recommends manager, controller, and gatekeeper instead. Sex buyers, of course, are clients or service users. And to top it all off, the term sex worker remains totally undefined and is only labeled as the correct, non-judgmental term to use for whom exactly? We don't know. In a position paper on trafficking from 2005, TAMPEP makes the following official statement. TAMPEP agrees along with other NGOs that women's migration cannot be identified with trafficking in women, but that trafficking in women is embedded in an international migratory process. So again, the sex work migration world and trafficking are not at all separate, are they? TAMPEP distinguishes between prostitution and trafficking in women through recognizing trafficking as an international crime and fundamental breach of human rights that occurs in other work areas other than prostitution. Yay, deflection! Exploitation is elsewhere, so don't look over here at us. Nothing to see here. Look away. Trafficking in women is blatant violation of women's human rights. Prostitution without violence, coercion, or deceit is not a violation of human rights. An individual's right to choose prostitution and the selling of sexual services as work. What can I say? The TAMPEP safety pamphlets, according to their own definition, are absolutely about trafficked women, not about sex workers. I'm used to people not understanding poverty as a grounds for coercion, even though we all get that there is a huge power imbalance between a poor woman and a financially stable man, and only deny this when there's money exchanged. But anyway, in the guidebook stories, we are talking violent, murderous pimps, and still this stuff is up on the official TAMPEP website. So, best case scenario, TAMPEP have changed their definition of trafficking since 1994, and simply forgot to delete these pamphlets off their website. Considering that there are other frontline NGOs who are looking to template for such material, which is free to download for anybody from the website, this still seems like a significant oversight. Returning to the guidebook story, we see, instead of Besa getting information on where to seek refuge from her pimp, it is suggested that her abortion being taken care of by medical professionals is, for now, all that she needs, and that she is now fit to go back to work. After this, Besa's story takes an absurd turn, morphing into a Pretty Woman rerun, wherein a gentleman, possibly but not clearly identified as a client, falls in love with her and takes her away to his mansion in the mountains where her pimp can't find her. Which works like magic because her pimp gives up looking for her and is never seen again. How many times does that happen in real life? And even when it does, what makes you think the guy who takes her to the mansion is trustworthy? The last woman Toida encounters remains unnamed, but is introduced dramatically after being thrown out of a car onto the street by a client and being found desperate and sobbing. Toida saves the day again by asking the woman if she needs anything, and soon figuring out that she has a problem with condoms breaking. Google Translate was not clear here, but I think that's what's going on. So the obvious solution is to get that woman straight on the pill. Yeah. The woman also tells Toida that she is in debt bondage to a pimp that is threatening her family, but nothing is done about that, and it never comes up again. We've arrived at the end of our journey through TAMPEP sex work safety pamphlets, and I need to take a deep breath and compose myself to not fill my conclusion with lots of cursing, because I'm exhausted and I'm angry. At the end, what all the pamphlets accomplish together is to normalize an absolutely unbearable work environment. At every corner lies a different possibility of misery, illness, violence, and death. One misstep, one broken condom, one bad trick, and Sabina, Sofia, Augusta, Yuna, Toida, or Besa will be lying on their deathbeds like Shapresa did. Yet nowhere, not even once, does TAMPEP mention the possibility of exit. It is always implied or specifically stated that staying in the sex trade is the only option, and all a woman can do is to use the bits of agency she has left to seek consistent medical help in hopes of not falling ill or dying before she has earned enough money to build a new life. That new life and fairy tale ending with a boyfriend and a new home is dangled in front of her constantly. Nonetheless, interestingly enough, the pamphlets accurately describe prostitution as something that women are not keen to stay in, but they all hope to merely transition through, to get to a point where they can have what isn't named but implied as a real job. This is in complete contradiction to the claim of organizations like TAMPEP that prostitution is a job like any other that should be recognized and treated like legitimate work. Let me say that, yes, outreach and healthcare programs for women in street prostitution are valuable, and they need to operate whether a woman is currently in a position to exit or not. But exit must be an option fought for and made available by any reputable NGO working with women who live under conditions like the ones shown in these pamphlets. It's not good enough to test women for AIDS and then hand them contraceptive pills and condoms when afterwards they are simply sent right back into the environment, into the arms of the very men who are making them paranoid, sick, and as we see not too rarely, dead. This is what you always have to keep in mind with organizations who claim to advocate for sex workers and to promote harm reduction. When they say sex work, they're not merely referring to a middle-class, financially stable woman with no pimp and lots of choices, but they mean the indigenous 18-year-old on the street. They mean women addicted to drugs and so poor that not using condoms to increase earnings seems like a good idea. They mean the young Nigerian or Albanian woman in debt bondage to a trafficker. They are not advocating for a clean, wholesome industry. They are apologists for poverty, trafficking, and a fundamentally racist system. When they say harm reduction, they mean lowering AIDS transmissions by hounding prostitute women about condom and needle use, and lowering rapes and murders by calling on women to learn methods of self-defense or supposed attack prevention. Harm reduction is setting the goal that at least prostitute women don't die. They mean keeping women alive and healthy enough to work. Though you have to ask yourself how healthy you can be if you have to check every 15 minutes on the job, if your friend might have been kidnapped or may already be lying dead in the bushes. This rhetoric sanitizes exploitation and normalizes violence, especially when it's coupled with not even once suggesting that women caught inside these impossible circumstances deserve a way out that does not mean going through a sea of potentially diseased, definitely disgusting, middle-aged European dicks. The position peddled here is essentially this. Give the women to the buyers with as little interference as possible, because if you criminalize them, they'll really start hurting women, and we mean more than they're raping and killing them right now. Simply send doctors in for health checkups now and then so we get fewer AIDS cases in the general population, and otherwise leave it be. That's all you can do. You gotta expect this. This cannot be changed, and even though we know and show the women want out, advocating for exit services is paternalistic moralizing. Now, please give us your donations. I'm sure there are people in TAMPEP who mean well, maybe even most people involved, but this does not change the fact that the organization as a whole has a responsibility to act for the benefit of human rights, and this isn't it. If you're under the impression that the safety concerns described in these pamphlets only apply in countries with total prohibition on prostitution, examples from German legalization and New Zealand's decriminalization are in the description.